The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Welcome to Public Health America, a weekly program produced by BronxNet in partnership with Mercy College. I'm your host, Dr. William Latimer. Here on Public Health America, we speak with experts from an array of specialties across the liberal arts and health professions to provide you with not only the best science, but practical tips to live a healthier life. We also celebrate what studies have long documented, namely the unparalleled value of a liberal arts college education by setting the stage to pursue a career of your choice, increase lifetime earnings, and engage in civil debate. Our experts will share decisions they made and support they received that helped them to beat the odds. By sharing one or two life lessons, their stories may provide you with the inspiration and method to realize your dreams. This is Public Health America. Hello, welcome to Public Health America. I'm your host, Dr. William Latimer. It is an absolute pleasure and privilege to have with me today Dr. Sister Catherine Nerney, Associate Professor of Religious Studies at Chestnut Hill College in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Director of the Institute for Forgiveness and Reconciliation. Sister Kathy, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to be with you and to share some things about our college and our institute.
Thank you so much. And looking forward to our conversation. So, you've been doing a great deal of work at Chestnut Hill College for some time. But in recent years, a new initiative that I think is quite exciting and very important is directing the Institute for Forgiveness and Reconciliation. Tell us a little bit about the Institute.
Yes, I'm delighted to do that. So our institute itself opened in March of 2009, and it now, some 14 years later, because there was work in preparation for it, but some 14 years later, we see that the need for forgiveness and reconciliation in our world, in our country, in our cities, and in our families and interpersonal relationships is great. And we try to address all of this from the personal level to the societal level to the global level. And we do it through, I'd say, multiple avenues. So we do scholarship and research in the area of forgiveness and reconciliation. We do networking and outreach and service with every group of people who shares our same commitment to help heal divisions wherever they exist. And so that's our second. And thirdly, we do formation, we do education, and we do skill development, both of our students, staff, and faculty, and also with outreach to the community that we invite to join us. So it's a lot of effort and a lot of collaboration that brings us all together.
That's a broad palette and exciting. I should mention that this segment is part of a 4-segment series focusing on how faith and interfaith initiatives foster health and public health in communities, whether urban, rural, regionally, or globally. And clearly, the Institute for Forgiveness and Reconciliation is highly consistent with that focus. Tell us a little bit about the history, the founding, what got things started.
Yeah, well, I'm delighted. So let's see what got things started. I think we can say most clearly that our Institute for Forgiveness and Reconciliation is a concrete demonstration of the mission of our college, which was founded by Sisters of St. Joseph in 1924. So the mission of the Sisters of St. Joseph is to live and work that all may be one. So it's one thing to pray for this. It's one thing to believe that this is God's dream for our world, but it's another important thing to do the work that can bring about healing and reconciliation in so many of the divided places in our own hearts and extending out into our city, country, and world. And so we opened the Institute in 2009 because we wanted to make sure that as an inclusive Catholic community, we were really being faithful to the purpose for which our college exists. So that purpose is to really provide this inclusive Catholic community where everyone is welcome and everyone has a sense of belonging. And so that work has really asked much of us. And I think one of the things I'm most proud of is that our college today really is a global community. Even though we're a small liberal arts college, we have such diversity in terms of race, faith, affiliations, gender, even gender identity, social classes. We are all here together and trying to have a microcosm of the way our world could live and work together. And we hope that the attitudes, dispositions, and behaviors that we're trying to promote here will, in fact, we trust that they will make a difference in our world.
I think that's so important. And I'd like to, you'll correct me if I get the numbers wrong, but a typical private liberal arts college in the United States usually will have about 20% of its student population be Pell eligible, meaning students that might have some degree of financial hardship. What makes Chestnut Hill College unique, there are many things, and you've touched upon some of them, but the Pell eligible percentage, I think, is about 50%. Mm-hmm. There's a great many first generation college students of color, veterans, and a variety of student populations that might not otherwise benefit from the transformational value of a liberal arts education. Speak to that and how that incredible mission of the college intersects with the Institute.
Yeah, well, as you described, over 50% of our student population really would be otherwise underserved. And a good number of them come from urban communities. And right here in Philadelphia, as well as in so many other cities, from Baltimore to Newark, New Jersey, Trenton, Camden, different places from which our students come. They live in cities which have been thoroughly threatened, let me say, by gun violence as a number one issue of violence in our cities today. And so we work with every one of our students. We had a month of nonviolence in October where we had another group of people that we work with called Heeding God's Call. And people from Heeding God's Call were here throughout that month doing all kinds of education, all kinds of walks for justice. We had the Archbishop of Philadelphia come for an interfaith liturgy that welcomed everyone to pray for justice and peace, for an end of gun violence in our cities. So we try to deal with whatever issues our students are most stressed by, are creating the kinds of anxieties that make even their education more difficult than even if they couldn't get into school, but they get into school, but are still fighting traumatic situations in their families and their neighborhoods. So we try to work with them to give them what they need to make a difference in their families and neighborhoods. And I could share stories of how they go home and what they share with their families and how their families have thanked us for what we're trying to do, but not to put the accolades on us, because I mean, it's not always easy, but we work to address whatever is most threatening to the students that we teach right here at the college.
Wonderful. So let's give us a little bit of an update on the international work. You've mentioned a couple of times that the Institute is focusing on regional, local, urban, but also global, and initiatives involving peace, involving linkages to interfaith initiatives that promote peace and address the terrible pandemic of gun violence, let alone regional. Tell us a little bit about the international work.
Yeah, well, as you were saying that, Bill, I almost turned around to see if I could find some of the crocheted sunflowers that we have been making here in the Institute to be in solidarity with the people of Ukraine. So they're on yellow and blue ribbons. And I thought I had some here on my desk, but I can't put my hands on them right now. But we've been doing a lot of work to promote the kind of end. How can we be involved? We have a prayer for Ukraine that we say every day. You can find the prayer in our chapel. We gave out copies of it at Forgiveness Day last week. So that's one thing. Secondly, we use other people throughout the world whose experience of forgiveness and reconciliation has something to teach us. And one of the countries that I have worked with most closely is Rwanda, where I spent a semester 12 years after their genocide, where 1 million people were slaughtered. But they made a commitment as a country to create not just a commission for truth and reconciliation, but actual pathways to help both perpetrators and victims to come together. So having spent a semester there and having met thousands of people, both those in prison as perpetrators of the genocide and victims that have come together to heal one another and their country, I have learned so much from them. And I think it's a great lesson for us here in the United States, a first world nation that sees itself very dominant and powerful, to learn from others who have taken this path to healing and have so much to teach us. So we do a lot of work with other people. We've brought so many people to campus to share their stories, to help us see what is happening around our world and how much we need to be invested in it, that we are one human family. And interconnectedness is a really important concept that we try to live by, that we are all so connected, that to think that anything exists in isolation is to be both non-scientific as well as non-faith-filled.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Dr. Sister Catherine Nerney is going to tell us a little bit about her journey and her education that set the table and the stage for the amazing work that she's done since. This is Public Health America. I'm your host, Dr. William Latimer. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Public Health America. I'm your host, Dr. William Latimer. So, Dr. Sister Kathy, it's at this phase of the segment that I always ask our guest the same question. Where were you born and what were some of your formative experiences?
Oh, Okay, well, so I was born outside of Philadelphia in a little suburban area called Drexel Hill. And I was born to my mother, Catherine O'Shaughnessy, my father, Owen Francis Nerney, and my dad was born in County Sligo, Ireland. So I'm going to say I was very much formed in kind of an Irish storytelling family. We sat on my dad's knee every night as he told stories and sang Irish songs. And I just grew up with a great love of storytelling and of entering the lives of others as my dad passed them on to us. So that kind of influenced me. As I was entering college. And I have to say, I too was a first generation college student. Neither my mother nor father had a college background, though they were wonderfully encouraging of the five of us. So I entered Chestnut Hill College, and I would say that I entered with a love of language, a love of history, and any of the social sciences, anything that brought people together, because it was so much the story of my life up to that point. And I began with a major in French and Latin, as a matter of fact. I finished with a major in French. I took a lot of Latin courses, but not a major in it. So I majored in French. And here at Chestnut Hill College, everything we did was done with great passion and great commitment. And I think what I remember most about my education here is the fact that I would look at the professors and I would think, wow, they are so passionate about this. Like they love this. They are so committed to this. And I remember thinking, whatever that is, I want it too. I want to have that because it just seems to be so life-giving. So I graduated from Chestnut Hill College with a degree in French. And at that point, I began teaching French. I had entered the Sisters of St. Joseph, and I began teaching French. And it was at that point that I began to wonder if that would be the rest of my life, because, you know, my passion was to want the students that I taught to have purpose and meaning in their life. And how could I make sure that they were really developing kind of a passionate sense of why they were here and what they wanted to do with their lives? So my French helped me greatly. And I'll say more about that when we move forward.
What a what a lovely narrative. Let's go back to your dad just for a minute, and your parents. So did your dad emigrate to the U.S. and meet your mom, or what was there? Were they both in Ireland, or what was the?
No, my mom's mom and dad were in Ireland, but my mother was born here in this country. My dad came from County Sligo and came here in his 20s after his mother died. And I know we know this story so frequently that he left 6 brothers and sisters back there, and he hoped he'd help send some money back to his dad. Not that that happened all that much as he arrived here trying to find work himself. So where did he meet my mother? He met my mother at, it's called AOH, the Ancient Order of Hibernius. It's an Irish a dance house place. And so I said they loved music, they loved dancing, and they met at this Irish dance Ancient Order of Hibernius. And so they married, and we grew up in this Irish Catholic family. And I have to say that I think the importance of language and poetry and music and storytelling was so important in our family. I just took it for granted. I thought everybody felt that way. I thought everybody loved all these things. And I'm very grateful because I know it has shaped my life. I even as you know, I talk about our institute or I talk about people in Rwanda, it was listening to their stories, feeling so drawn in to their lived experience that kind of passed on to me the same desires that I heard in them. So I feel that my mother and father created a great sense of empathy in us, and I feel grateful for that gift.
You go to Chestnut Hill, you major in French and sometime Latin, which is great. Tell us a little bit more about what made your experience. Why did you choose Chestnut Hill? What was that experience like? Were there any challenges you faced? There may not have been. That's fine. And what were some of the highlights of that experience?
Yeah. Well, I chose Chestnut Hill. I went to a Catholic high school where we had many, many different communities of sisters and lay people and, you know, all of that. But I have to say that I loved the relationship that I saw that the Sisters of St. Joseph had with one another. There was such a friendship, an experience of the way they related with one another. I worked in offices with a number of them, and I loved the way they were together. So my attraction to Chestnut Hill College, I must say, came from my experience of the sisters that I had in high school. I wanted to have that same kind of interconnectedness that I talk about, but I saw it in them. And it wasn't something they were performing. It was just who they were. And I wanted a college community that had that same sense. And I found it at Chestnut Hill College. I never for 1 second thought, I wonder if someplace else would have been better for me. Never had that thought. And so I'd say I moved through the college, pretty easily. Sometimes I wish I struggled a little bit more because I want to identify with everybody's struggles. I don't think I had all that many myself, quite honestly. But I know that that's pretty real. And I guess the biggest thing I want to say is that I didn't know what a degree in French was going to offer me. I had no idea. But as I moved on, no longer teaching French, went on to study theology. And I have to say that if I had not had French, I would not have been able to do the dissertation that I did, where my primary research was all in French. And I was so grateful that I had this background, which I never knew would serve me so well. And then, as I mentioned, the fact that I had spent a semester in Rwanda, which was a Belgian colony. And so their language, beyond Kinyarwanda, their second language is French. And so I was able to communicate with everyone in Rwanda because of my French. And it's like, what a surprise. I had no idea in studying it that it was going to serve me for the rest of my life. And so I can't be grateful enough for what happened to me in college and how it has served me moving forward. So I say, wow, my college experience changed my life.
And in very specific ways. Let's talk about that. You know, you've mentioned Rwanda a couple of times. Talk a little bit about, you know, there's the link with storytelling. There's the link to reconciliation and forgiveness. You brought perpetrators in prison from the genocide together with victims. I can't imagine how difficult that must have been. Talk a little bit about the specifics of that work and how it changed your life, if that's a fair question.
Well, I can say that my capacity to bring together victims and perpetrators was not my initiative. people introduced me to groups working in Rwanda who were already committed to this work. So I would go there and people would think of me as the teacher. And I reminded them over and over again, no, you are the teachers. You don't see yourself as the teacher. I am here learning from you. So it was through a group called Les Bons Samaritains, the Good Samaritans, that work with both perpetrators and victims of the genocide. They go into the prisons. The victims tell their stories. And by listening to the victims' stories, so many of the perpetrators began to reflect on what they did, most of whom had thought they were just being faithful to their country. As a Hutu, they were doing what their country was asking them to do. And it's only when they heard the stories of the victims that they began to realize the pain and horror that they had really given themselves to. So I brought them together only because I was led to that by the people that I met in Rwanda. And I would go, these perpetrators would be allowed out of prison to go meet with the families. And they worked in small groups, which I visited, in which they were led to say, how would you want to make reparation for what you did to these families? And they would say they would help rebuild their homes. They would give them anything that they could. So the people from prison would be allowed out and they would go to visit the families of those they had wronged. The families were prepared for their coming. So there are people working on both sides of this, with the victims to be ready to meet the perpetrators, with the perpetrator to have remorse for what they had done. And in Rwanda, they were rebuilding homes. They were re-cementing all the paths that had been uprooted by all of the bombings and things that they had done. There was so much good work going on. So I want to say that before I left for Rwanda, there were widows that said to me, do not go back to America and just tell our stories. When you go back, we want you to figure out where your own divides are and cross over those barriers and bring forgiveness and reconciliation there. So I have to say, I have said to thousands of people that challenge that the widows of Rwanda offered me was something I could not bear alone. I shared it with our college, we did, and it seemed so integral to our mission that we did lots of work. So I've done work with prisoners, bringing prisoners in the state of Pennsylvania to meet with victims. There's a group in Harrisburg that works on this. I went for training. We do a lot of work with our own criminal justice system here. So restorative justice is a big part of our curriculum so that we can change our justice system so that people can talk together and find some path to healing whenever it's possible. It's not going to happen in every case, but whenever it's possible to allow that to happen.
Incredibly powerful and poignant. I can't think of a time on this program where we had a vignette and a description that was more powerful than this. I want to thank Dr. Sister Catherine Nerney, Associate Professor of Religious Studies of Chestnut Hill College in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and the Director of the Institute for Forgiveness and Reconciliation. This is Public Health America. I'm your host, Dr. William Latimer. Take care. See you next time.